Hello, book lovers, and welcome to Authors Love Bookstores from a Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Joe Moldover, author of the novel Every Moment After, and I am so happy to be with you today for a very special show. This is the second anniversary of our program and the 99th independent bookstore we've had the privilege to support. And today we are at BookPeople of Moscow in Moscow, Idaho, with bookseller Carol Price. Carol, hello. It's so good to see you.
Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And we are joined by singer, songwriter, and novelist Josh Ritter. Josh, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. Thanks a lot. Hi, Carol.
Yeah, I mean, we're thrilled to have you both. Um, for those, Josh is somebody who needs little introduction, but for anybody who's happening across this broadcast and doesn't know, Josh Ritter is the singer-songwriter behind about 10, we think, we were debating it, studio albums, a
Mm-hmm.
number of fabulous live albums as well. He is the author of Bright's Passage, his debut novel in 2011. And most recently, he is the author of The Great Glorious Goddamn of It All, his brand new novel, which is fantastic, which is available now, and which we are encouraging everybody to head over to Book People of Moscow online. Links in the chat. Pick up a copy. We'll be reminding you during the broadcast. So, Josh, I want to start with you. We are here all together because Book People of Moscow is your favorite and beloved independent bookseller.
Yeah.
Tell us why. What's so great about it?
Well, I think one of my actually it's one of my earliest memories was of going into Book People when it was a tiny store across the street from where it is now. It was next to a barber shop, a guy named Clarence, and he had a little tiny barber shop, and he had an accordion in there, and he was a little tiny guy with a fringe of hair and a barber and a guy that really was somebody that I thought about a lot and as I was writing this book, actually, now that I think of it. But like right next to Clarence's barbershop was Book People, and it was like a hobbit's house. You know, it was like it was somehow, even though it was kind of an 1890s brick block of buildings, it was somehow when you walked in there, it felt like you were walking into like a lair. You know, it had a feeling of like that there was at the back a dragon on a pile of gold. And, and I remember that being little, my dad getting a haircut and then going there and we'd get a book. And it was Book People, and that was special. You know, going to Book People was a big deal to a little kid. You know, it felt very grown up, and so it was always in my mind as a kind of a magical place. And then as time went by, it moved across the street and it changed hands, and I would go there all through my teenage years looking for all sorts of kind of finds, especially stuff like local history, a lot of stuff like that was interesting to me for reasons I wasn't sure of yet. And then I went away to college and kept in touch with those folks. And then when they decided that it was time for them to move on, like that's when I think Carol and you guys came into the story and made it an absolutely amazing magical a place again too. It's just I love going in there. I love the way it makes my family feel. It's a really, and I think that in Moscow, Moscow has all kinds of things, and all kinds of debates going on. All sorts of stuff is happening, and the culture wars have not avoided it,
No.
and I think that a bookstore like Book People that is giving everyone the chance to encounter new ideas and encounter like brave thinking is so important. So that's
Thanks.
why I would say that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what we're there for, definitely. It's so fun to hear you talk about the early days. I wasn't in Moscow then,
Mhm.
but it was right across the street from where we are now. And I can just imagine I'm thinking about the pictures I've seen of your book event for your first book, Bright's
Yeah.
Passage, which there wasn't room inside the store for that author event to happen. So it was outside in front of the store.
Yeah.
And you were in the back of a truck. You would have been you would have been facing the old book people. And
Yeah, that's right.
I was thinking about how cool that must have been for you. Maybe you can remember what was going through your mind looking at that old where you used to go to the bookstore, and there
Oh,
you
it
were
was
as
so
your first time author.
absolutely, absolutely.
That's so
It was.
great. That makes me want to be at the store right now. Um, Quick word to the online audience. If you're with us live rather than watching in future time, drop a comment or a question in the chat. We'll get to as many of them as we can. Um, I want to ask the two of you about the book. I'm going to go to you first, Josh, and then come over to you, Carol. But Great Glorious Goddamn of It All, fantastic novel. It's Josh's
Thank
second.
you.
Josh, for people who haven't had a chance to read it yet, I have given this book to a bunch of people, and I always kind of struggle to describe, like, to find a comp for it when I give it to somebody. If they say, like, what is this book like? I'm like, well, it's like, it's mythical, it's lyrical, it's funny, but it can also be very dark. It can be profane, it's romantic. I mean, there's just like, I can you give us the elevator pitch for this book and tell us, Stephen King reviewed your first book, and he comped you to Ray Bradbury. And I think that, there is something about this work that reminds me of a work like Something Wicked, This Way Comes. I wonder if you would just give us the pitch for this book and also just tell us, like, who do you associate it with? What do you think it's similar to?
Wow, that's well. I thank you. I think that that like records, I think which is the only other way I can compare writing. I find that I work best when I allow a number of different things to kind of stew together, and I think that involves, obviously there's artistic things that you're thinking of, like there's influences and there's stuff like that, and then there's just the what's happening in the moment, and so I, I had been living by the time I started working on Great Glorious. I had been living away from Idaho for about 20 years, on and uh, at some remove, and as that time has increased and the distances have increased, I found that there was a magic that kind of crept in, that and the magic that kind of crept in. It's not always like present, but it always gilds. I guess it gilds everything. It kind of gets around everything, and I started to look at that kind of effect. It was like and realized that I wanted to write about Idaho, which I felt like I could do at this point. I had and I wanted to write about it, and I wanted to write about it and imbue it with the kind of wonder that I had when I was a kid. And then I wanted to take that wonder and I wanted to make it like 10 times bigger. I wanted to make all my, like, many, many days in the woods just wandering around on Moscow Mountain. I wanted to take that and make it 10 times more dangerous. I wanted to involve, I wanted it to just be as large as it felt like to me then. And I wanted to write a story um, of a very old man looking back at his earliest life in the woods of northern Idaho, and just I wanted to play with all his memory and his hopes and his efforts. I just wanted to, and I was thinking about, like, the people that have always made me happy a kind of as narrators, or as writers that don't like play around. I guess I really love, I always have loved, and from so long, just the way Mark Twain delivers the driest thing, or like he tells jokes like he just assumes that you're smart enough to figure them out, and like that you'll be, and he's not always looking for a laugh. He's sometimes just looking for a reaction that steers the craft in a new direction. And the books like Roughing It, and of course, which is an amazing book about his early life. And then Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn absolutely was like, I don't think that like I could have conceived of this kind of narrator if I hadn't thought about some of those great early like Mark Twainish type characters. They're so fun.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Carol,
Yeah.
what about you? I mean, you're a professional bookseller. This is your thing. Who are you selling this book to? How are you describing it? Where is it on the shelf? Just tell us about this book.
Well, I would put it in my staff picks because I really did love it. and and I don't choose lots and lots of books to be in my staff picks. I'm pretty picky. I want people to trust me when I say that I really love a book, and I don't say it about that many. And I also had a hard time describing it, but I've come to think of it as what I would call a kind of a Northwest epic, a Pacific Northwest epic. But it has that feeling of being a fable, a tall tale. Even though I know that the time frame is the early part of the century up to modern times, I sometimes felt as if it could have been any time in the past, and it had that timeless feeling to it, and the possibility that anything might happen. You never quite get away from that feeling of there being danger. I think what Josh said about wanting Moscow Mountain to be even more dangerous than in real life. I get that feeling throughout the book. Like you never quite know exactly what's going to happen and what's going to be bad coming.
Yeah.
Although I think we're reassured by the fact that Weldon is an old man telling the story. So we know that he makes it. We know that he makes it, but you never know. You don't know what else is going to happen in that life, and so it definitely has that little bit of danger, and but the sweep of it feels very epic to me, and the literary quality, the stylistic sort of lyrical quality makes me think of it as a fable, a fairy tale type.
Yeah, just kind of quintessentially American.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Wow.
A couple of questions, Josh. Julie, who's joining us. Question for you about balancing songwriting with book writing. I mean, you are especially renowned as a lyricist. I think you're considered to be sort of one of the just, best and most compelling lyricists working today. I would love to hear just a little bit of Julie, and I would just love to hear a little bit about not only balancing songwriting and book writing, but I mean, what is the difference between composing like a great, great song as you have versus setting down an entire novel?
Oh yeah, I mean I think it's kind of like I mean I think that's a really good question, because I think kind of the friction of those two things is what keeps it all moving forward. I was just sitting here like getting ready before we came on here, like, and I was reading back through the book, and I was like, man, I miss being in this book. It's really fun. I miss being. I wish I was this far along on a news story right now. And I was like, and it gave me this like kind of forward hopefulness and anticipation of something, which I don't. There's so long to go before something like that. But like the thing is that the writing a book and then moving on and doing a song, I found that they very rarely really coexist at the same time. But I always feel that I run towards the writing as a refuge, and sometimes songs just aren't a refuge. Sometimes they're compulsive, sometimes they're apocalyptic, sometimes they're just not a place you want to hang out. And as you're working, like you can't like decide I'm not going to write this sort of thing. You just kind of have to do it. and then walk away. And I've found that, like, sometimes too long living in a song or in a group of songs is just not good for my brain. And I found over time that I needed to have the that I was still looking for an outlet and a way to describe things to myself that I could turn to, and when I wasn't obsessively working on a song. And that's how I first conceived of even beginning to write in another way, in another format. So yeah, like that's, but like the thing that I think that the most important thing is that it's like you, as an artist, as a all around kind of artist, I think, which we all are. We don't just do one thing. Like, we, in our lives, we need those spots of refuge, and like, or a fallow field that, like, lies fallow for a season, so that it gets the nutrients to grow something that's actually useful.
Mhm.
Having two fields, having a field of working in a prose form and a novel form, and then being able to go and spend time in the music world, of my own, like, weird, like, in my diaries. It's fun to go back and forth, and I think that they really help each other, and they help to, like, mostly to moderate each other.
That's fascinating. Another question coming in. Um, Many of the people who watch the program and are interested in this are themselves aspiring writers. And so, one of the things that we love to talk about on this show are kind of sort of market considerations. So, this is a question for either one of you. Carol, you might want to lead off on this, just since since you're out there selling books. But Mark asks, what do you feel the appetite is out there for a tall tale like this, almost Paul Bunyan-y? Do you think this kind of fable is something that can appeal to adult or literary readers? Carol, I'll go to you first. What do you think? I mean, are your lit fiction fans picking this up? Does it appeal
Yes.
to them?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, absolutely. My experience in the last few years has been that the appetite for this type of book is very strong, kind of a voracious appetite. When I first started about 10, 11 years ago at the store, we didn't really have that big of a section that of like mythology or fables. But I've seen the demand grow, and the number of books that are based in that world has grown. And like Neil Gaiman has gone after it with Norse mythology. There's a lot more interest in mythology. Some of the most popular literary fiction of the last few years, Circe, there's a lot that have been super popular. And almost anything that I get for the store that is a retelling of mythological tales, anything about folklore, is of interest to a lot of people. So from a bookseller perspective, I see the demand as very high. And it's not something that everybody reads, but it's definitely gotten a lot of traction, both for teen and YA readers, the younger adolescent. I mean, all the way down to the middle readers for the elementary school, the Rick Riordan series that are all based in mythology. Those are hugely popular and remain popular. So I think much more than I remember when I was a kid. I don't remember any of that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So.
Josh, you have a take on the market,
Yeah.
or sort of what the appetite for this stuff?
Well, I as a person who I feel like, like all artists, I think we kind of take in stuff and then and redigest it and bring it into and do. So one of the things I really appreciate and love about myths is their durability. They are built to last. Myths are built to last. They change over time. They absorb things and kick stuff out, and in so many ways that is like it is such a beautiful and dependable and evolutionary form of art and lesson telling and all these things that are so vital to our idea of as ourselves as a society. I think that's one thing. So I think you can never go wrong with a myth. Also, like myths are like fun. They are so fun. Like the stuff that like that I think it's true that like what Carol was saying. I don't remember the kind of approach to stories in my youth that was so. I mean, I found stuff, but like I don't think everybody finds it, and it's like that is some good stuff, and it is not, it is bare knuckle, and it is it teaches like all kinds of stuff that like you get all kinds of lessons in there with whatever you're trying to get across. I think that's beautiful, and I also I think that it's it's just uh, it's just like it's just I just think I had something else I wanted to say, but I can't remember what it was now. So
Well, I have a follow-up question about the book, but I just want to pause for a moment and remind the audience, both the people who are with us live right now and also people watching this video in future time. This is a great conversation. We're so happy to be here having it. We do have a purpose. We are supporting independent bookselling during a very difficult time for that industry. This is our 99th bookstore. We want you to go over to BookPeople of Moscow. We want you to pick up some books. Pick up Great Glorious Goddamn of It All. If you've already read it, pick up another copy. Give it to a friend. That's what I've done. Pick up some other books. We're going to have some recommendations soon. But get out there and support independent book selling. Josh, question for you. You mentioned sort of wanting the mountain to feel dangerous in this book. And sort of one thing that strikes me maybe about the difference between writing a novel and writing a song is that I think in songs there's sometimes less room for really strong, interesting antagonists. And in this book, you have a few. There's a frame narrative in this book where you sort of have a little bit of a bumbling antagonist, Joe Mutro, who's not a super competent antagonist, but in the heart of the narrative, you have Lyndon Laughlin. I'm not sure how to say it. Laughlin.
Yeah.
And Lyndon is one for the ages. I mean, he is an antagonist who is right out of myth. He could be in Bradbury. He could be in Stephen King. Love to hear you just talk a little bit about that character and where he comes from and the experience of writing a really juicy bad guy.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, yeah, I think the first thing is that like the we are living right now in such like right now around us the archetype, the archetypal thing is all over everything, whether it's the pandemic or the war, all these things and these and there was something about the last little while that really jumped out at me, and that was that there are bullies in the world. And bullies are ascendant. They're out there. They're bullies are often winning, and I wanted a bully, and I wanted this guy to be at heart the scariest bully I could think of. And I think it's funny because at every age we have bullies. In every age, I think we choose a different scary bully, and or get bullied in it by people that however it should work out. But like I wanted to make sure that like this character, Lyndon Laughlin, was besides just being an evil, potentially mythical kind of weird immortal being, was also just a petty bully, and that was what made him to me truly loathable, and also fun to write because I was not a bully in high school, and it was fun to write from the other direction and try and make a character that's try and go in the direction where like a Richard III type, a guy that's really fun and silver tongued and just evil to the core, and was just it was so enjoyable to write him. I found it very cathartic.
You could tell that you had a blast writing that character, and you found this callousness in that character just this quality of callousness that I think is, common to sort of real bullies. And you just hit that one out of the park. So
Thank you.
loved it.
Thank
Loved
you.
it. Harold, going to come over to you for a question.
Yeah.
One of the things we try to crack on this show, again, because a lot of the people who watch are themselves writers, they're aspiring writers. One of the things we try to crack, and we have the privilege of having great independent booksellers with us, is figuring out what books sell, because nobody can figure it out. Specifically, in this case, we have an author who is already a high-profile artist, has a fan base, has a platform. Does that make it easier to sell the book? How does that dovetail with book selling? Are these two totally different populations? How do you think about that? And more generally, do you know when books are going to take off, or does it take you as much by surprise as it does the rest of us?
Wow, good question. So, speaking about Josh in particular, being a musician and an author, I don't know that it necessarily makes it any easier to sell a book, being famous already. I think the writing does really have to stand for on itself, and not anybody that's a famous musician can write a novel that's great, and so I don't think that that's a given. If you're already famous, doesn't mean you're going to be a great author or a famous author. I don't know if we can always tell when a book is going to be a breakout book. I do remember having that feeling. For instance, when I read Anthony Doerr's All the Light We Cannot See, when I read that in the early proof, when they sent it out to us early, I remember thinking, oh my God, this book is going to be huge. And we all got behind it right away from the beginning because we could all tell what an amazing book it was. And not every book is lucky enough to get that kind of early support, but not every book deserves it. And so there's a lot coming at us. There's a lot of books that come out new every year. And a lot of it is luck in terms of the timing. I feel sorry for a lot of writers who brought out great books that were published in March of 2020. That was a really bad time to have a new book release anytime during 2020. So a lot of it is just luck, but the publishers put a lot of their effort behind certain titles. It's not always the same as what the booksellers would fall in love with, but a lot of time it dovetails nicely, and then everybody is moving in the same direction. But we don't always know. But sometimes you get an inkling when you read an early copy, and you're like, oh yeah, this one is great. And then we spread the word among ourselves, and that's how a book can get started, and that's what independent booksellers are great at, is spotting those and spreading the word to people who really, really love books.
Absolutely, and it's something that you just don't get from a big box store. You don't get from an online book retailer, and I mean, this is part of why it's so important that the independent book industry stay healthy and stay vibrant. Josh, back to you for a question. Another question on the book. In a recent interview with the New York Times, you were asked about your sort of artistic influences. And you mentioned Tom Waits, which I thought was awesome, and I think totally fits with this book. You also mentioned your mom.
Yeah.
And I know your mom was a scientist. I think maybe both of your parents were scientists.
Yeah.
You initially, I think, went to college to be a scientist before you became a musician. One thing I thought about this book was that there was actually a lot of interesting science in it. So, I mean, there was a lot in here about logging, about sort of the physics and engineering of moving these massive trees out of the woods and down off of a mountain, and how dangerous and difficult that was and what could go wrong. About the trees, about the woods. Did you
Yeah.
sort of have the opportunity to sort of do a lot of research in doing this book, or is this just stuff you knew from having grown up where you did?
Well, that was interesting because in two ways. One, when I was playing music around, whenever I would come to the Northwest, anywhere around, I would go to the like it was that was my go in bookstores in towns all over the Northwest. That was when I felt the most at home, and I would always, for some reason, I would always gravitate towards the local histories and that stuff. And not even like sometimes I would just be in the store, I would just absorb, and I just needed to be close to home, whatever it was. And I never really questioned it, but I also ended up with a lot of boxes of all kinds of local histories, and I read through them, but not in any organized way. And I was just kind of populating a world, and I didn't really realize that that's what I was doing until that's where I was. I suddenly had this kind of idea of not of Moscow, not of the town that I grew up in, so much as Moscow as being the gateway to that kind of interesting mythic world that you could walk in any direction and find something enormous that kind of boggled the mind.
Mhm.
And I wanted that, like, so I realized I knew about the landscape. I knew about these little towns out in the St. Joe area where these white pines grew so high into the sky. And I drove out there, and I would drive around, when I was in high school, and soak up the magic of this place. So it was always there. And then and I grew up also with my parents logging, because we had a wood stove that was our heat. I remember just logging with my folks. And so it was all there, but like also, it was really fun to learn about the interesting ways that these absolutely crazy people would bring down these trees in frigid temperatures with no doctors nearby. Anything was a potential killer.
Yeah, so
And
dangerous.
it was absolutely out of all scope. And to think that, like, for instance, like a lot of one of the companies that I ended up reading a lot about just by chance made white pine matchsticks. And so they took these enormous, football field sized trees and broke them down into the smallest little matchstick. But to get there, they floated them down a river, and they brought them to the mill, and like people died along the. It was just, to me, seemed like, how could I not want to write about that? And I started thinking, like, there just wasn't. I just hadn't run across that too much in my growing up. That particular brand of writing and kind of adventure writing. I guess I thought of like Mark Twain. I thought of like Jack London and service poems, and the Robert Louis Stevenson and that kind of thing. But I thought that's the sort of thing that maybe I would love to live in that world. And writing about my home was just so important. So it all kind of came together, and I started to realize I knew more about it than I thought.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was fascinating. I mean, just sort of as an
Thanks.
undercurrent to the adventure and to the drama, it was just this completely new world. I mean, especially to like a city boy like me, just so fascinating and
Thank
compelling.
you.
I just loved it.
Oh,
Um,
I have to tell you, there was like a really fun thing that I learned about called the lights, and it was like a place where all in the Northwest, where especially like around, say, like Spokane, where seasonal workers from all these different industries, silver mines and the orchards and the fisheries and farming and logging would all kind of come together in this place that I called the lights, which was just like the rowdiest place. And I had so much fun, like, learning about these places and the adventures that went along with them. It was wild, a
it
lot of
is
fun.
wild. It's a
Yeah.
wild world. It's amazing.
There's an old book that is out of print now, but you probably came across it, Josh. It's called "The Trees Grew Tall,"
Oh
and
yes, the
and
trees grew
that's one
tall. I know. Yeah.
that's one of the ones that you probably saw.
Yes, absolutely. Saint Mary's, and
Yeah,
yeah, right, yeah,
So great. In just a few moments, we're going to be getting into book recommendations. We're going to be talking about what you guys are reading, what you're recommending to the audience. And we're going to be dropping links for the audience to head over to Book People to buy. But first, Josh, before the show, you alluded to the possibility that you might be willing to pick up the guitar. You are... we love the book. The book is fantastic, but everybody watching also knows you as a singer. So if you're willing to do it, Carol, don't touch anything. I'm going to bump us off the screen.
Oh, sure.
But don't go anywhere. I'm just going to bump us into the green room. Don't bump, and I'll bump us right back on when Josh is done, and we'll talk books.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you, Josh.
Awesome. Well, this is a song that I actually wrote. I wrote because I wanted to expand the world of the music of the book. I wanted to I wanted a soundtrack for my writing, and I wrote this song, and then I just kind of wrote it into the book, and it was a lot of fun. It's called Somewhere. I love the world, but if I gotta leave it, let me go. Somewhere where a man is free to roam. Cut me loose to wander where a man can be his own. When he's on his own, somewhere. Somewhere there are mountains topped with snow. Somewhere where the wildflowers grow. Somewhere where I know I'll someday go. Someday when I go somewhere. The wonders of the world are vast and golden in array. I expect I'll visit every single one of them someday. Right up until my time has come and I'm called away. I'm called away somewhere. Somewhere there are mountains topped with snow. Somewhere where the wildflowers grow. Somewhere where I know I'll someday go. Someday when I go somewhere. Some folks pray to barbed wire and some folks pray to God. I've never been too sure if he is listening or he's not. But either way, here's hoping where I'm going ain't too hot. When I finally go somewhere. Somewhere there are mountain top with snow. Somewhere where the wildflowers grow. Somewhere where I know I'll someday go. Someday when I go somewhere. Someday when I go somewhere. Someday when I go somewhere. Awesome.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Fantastic. That was so great.
Thanks a lot.
That was great. The audience loved it. Kimberly, our producer, posted it's the best 2-year anniversary present ever.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Happy anniversary.
Great. Fantastic. Okay. I'm just taking a quick peek at the audience comments and questions. Sort of a good quick comment here from Jane. It's a long one, but I'm sorry, Jana. Sharing that listening to the book totally engaged her synapses, not only because of the storyline and the writing style, but she recognized the landscapes of Moscow, Troy, Deary, Cordelia Church, surrounding area. Yeah. Very, very cool.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Jen.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, everybody's. Okay. Well, that was fabulous. Getting a lot of love online. Thank you again for doing it. Guys,
Yeah.
let's sell some books. So, again, to the audience, whether you're with us live, whether you're with us in future time watching this recording, we exist. We are here. We've been doing this for 2 years. Me and my wonderful partner, Kimberly Hensel-Lorance, for one reason and one reason only, and that is to support independent booksellers. So we're going to talk about what we're reading, what people should be reading. We're going to be dropping links in the chat on all of the platforms. Click through, go to Book People of Moscow, pick up a copy of The Great Glorious Goddamn of It All and every other book we mention. Carol, you are the pro. We're going to come to you first. What are you reading? What are people buying? What do you want to tell us about?
Well, first I'm going to tell you about a poet that lives in Moscow also. His name is Robert Wrigley, and he is a great poet. And he has also 10 or 12 collections of poetry, kind of like Josh has albums. And Robert's newest collection of poetry is coming out from Penguin in June, and it's called The True Account of Myself as a Bird. And we're going to be having Robert launch event in early June, and we're very excited. Robert is a great poet that writes about the natural world and about emotion and people, and he's an amazing reader as well. So I really hope that if you haven't picked up any poetry, that you would think about getting this one. A lot of poetry is having a good time right now. There's a lot more people reading poetry than they used to, which is great. And so I really I recommend Robert Wrigley's The True Account of Myself as a Bird.
Wow. That's so great. He's so good. He's so good. It's amazing
I think an event we should try for someday, Josh, is you and Robert at the same time.
Oh, I'd be so honored. He's amazing. Yeah. Wow.
And I read a lot of nonfiction, and I'm very excited about the new David Sedaris that's coming out at the end of May. It's called Happy Go Lucky, and I'm looking forward to that very much.
Amazing.
I think that, David Sedaris I've been reading him a long time, and I've noticed that maybe it's me getting older or it's David getting older, but I find him to be getting deeper and more insightful, and I see so much there that I didn't used to see, and I just think he gets better every year.
Absolutely.
Have you ever had him out to the store for an event, Carol?
I have not had David at the store, but I've seen him in person at the Get Lit Festival up in Spokane. And he's great in person.
He's a blast.
Also. Also in person.
Awesome.
Big shout out to Northwest Public Broadcasting for introducing me to David Sedaris on the radio all those years ago.
Very cool. Those are great recommendations. Thank you. Josh, what are you reading?
Right now, I was just looking at I keep a list going. I read a really amazing Leif Enger, The Peace Like a River, which I was really lucky enough to come in contact with that incredible book, amazing this year. I think that was so cool. Another book that I really loved that I picked up, you know how it happens just by chance, things almost fall off the shelf at you, and there's a book by Stacy Schiff called Cleopatra, all about Cleopatra, which is a person who I realized I'd known of all my life and knew nothing about, kind of almost like a George Washington figure, where they are indelibly a character in your mind, and you want to learn more. And I found out, Stacy Schiff, that was a fantastic book. And then one other one that I've read that I loved, that I think I either told my dad or he told me about it, by Avi Loeb, called Extraterrestrial, about the Oumuamua, the large whatever object, interstellar object that flew by us. And it's a book by a Harvard astrophysicist all about scientific process, and it's just beautiful and so interesting.
That's awesome.
Those are three that I would love to highlight.
We have a follow. Those are great. All of the links are in the chat. We have a follow-up audience question, Josh. So we always ask about book recommendations, but because you are who you are, we have an audience recommendation about what music you're listening to,
Oh,
and
yeah.
if there are any musical artists you'd like to turn us on to.
Oh my gosh. There's always there's so much good stuff. We're so lucky to have the entire, like, sometimes it feels like, I don't know if it feels this way. It does certainly, like, with art of all kinds, like music these days, and books, and just and movies, and all the wonderful stuff that, like, that it's kind of like you do feel like kind of like an astronomer, that we can all be astronomers. We can just go up and look up and know that some of those galaxies are 13 billion years away, and that can be amazing, for us. And, like, so I'd say that, like, that it's that for me, I found that, a lot of times recently I've gone to stuff that's just a lot older. I'd say, like, and torch singers like Maybelle Mercer, and somebody that I've just been listening to I don't know what it's going to add up to or anything, but Jimmy Durante. If you can just listen to some Jimmy Durante, he just makes the world, like, so he almost, like, delivers almost like wisdom, like it's like, it feels like if someone came down from the mountain, and you're expecting, dire prophecy and damnation, and he kind of, like, started singing pennies from heaven or something like that. It's wonderful, and so good for me to listen to these days. So that, I mean, I wish that was more helpful, but Jimmy Durante and
Yes.
Mabel Mercer, the best.
Great,
The best.
love it. That's wonderful. Carol, last question is always for the bookseller, so I'm coming back to you. It's a fill in the blank. Being a successful independent bookseller is part luck, part hard work, and part what else?
I've been trying to. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I was going to say kindness, or I was going to say love, but I'm going to say wonder. Josh used the word wonder earlier in the show, and I think that sense of wonder that you get when you open up a book, when you walk into a bookstore, and you know that you're going to find something that's going to transport you. And I feel that art always gives you that sense of wonder, whether it's visual or music or books. And if I didn't have that every day when I was working, it would be hard to go to work. But I think that wonder is the quality that the readers are looking for, and what you find in the bookstore, and what I find as in my job. So that's what I'm going to say.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, this is beautiful. I absolutely love that answer. Thank you so much.
Thanks to Josh for the answer.
Thank you, Carol. Man, amazing.
Guys, time has just flown by. I just want to say to the two of you, to the online audience, this is our 2nd anniversary show. We've been rolling for 2 years, supporting independent bookstores during a terrible time. 99 as of this afternoon. I want to just express, first of all, my deep thanks and appreciation to A Mighty Blaze and to the founder, Jenna Blum, for the opportunity to have this show and to do this broadcast, to all of the viewers who watch us weekly and support independent bookselling, and to my friend, my partner, the wonderful Kimberly Hensel-Lawrence, fellow writer who is producing today and is my co-host. Thank you so much. Carol Price, Josh Ritter, thank you for being here today. It's been a complete pleasure. To the audience, head to BookPeople of Moscow, pick up Great Glorious Goddamn of It All, support independent bookselling, come back next week for more. Until then, stay well, keep reading.